Superhero shows are all starting to feel the same, aren't they? Well, Daredevil Born Again is here to change that, and if you're not ready for a dark, gritty, and violent return to Hell's Kitchen, you might want to stick to the brightly colored fluff. Daredevil Born Again is an upcoming Disney Plus series that continues the story of Matt Murdock, a blind lawyer who moonlights as the vigilante Daredevil. The show is set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, aka the MCU, and it's a direct continuation of the Netflix series, picking up 5 years after we last saw Matt, Foggy, and Karen. It was initially conceived as an 18-episode season, but was later split into 2 parts. The first season premieres on March 4th, 2025, with 2 episodes. The full season is going to have 9 episodes, with new episodes dropping weekly on Tuesdays. Interestingly, episodes 5 and 6 will be released together too on March 25th. This unusual mid-season double drop has fans speculating about a major plot twist or even a cliffhanger. But that's not all. The second season has already been greenlit and is expected to premiere in early to mid-2026. This second season is going to have 8 episodes. Let's talk about who's bringing this show to life though. Of course, Charlie Cox is back as Matt Murdock / Daredevil. Cox first gained widespread recognition for his role in the 2007 fantasy film Stardust, and later starred in HBO's Boardwalk Empire. He's joined by Vincent D'Onofrio, reprising his role as the menacing Wilson Fisk / Kingpin. D'Onofrio is known for his diverse roles in films like Full Metal Jacket, Men in Black, and Jurassic World. Excitement surrounds the upcoming series as familiar faces return alongside new additions. Deborah Ann Wall will reprise her role as Karen Page, Eldon Henson as Foggy Nelson, and John Bernthal as Frank Castle / The Punisher. Ayala Zurrer will once again portray Vanessa Marina Fisk, and Joanne Wally will return as Maggie Murdock. Adding to the anticipation, the series will introduce new characters, with Margarita Laviva playing Heather Glenn, Matt Murdock's new love interest, and then late actor Camar de los Reyes as Hector Ayala, White / White Tiger, and Tony Dalton as Swordsman. The directing team includes Michael Custa, Jeffrey Nachmanoff, David Boyd, and the duo of Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead. Before we dive into Born Again, let's take a quick look back at the Daredevil series that streamed on Netflix from 2015 to 2018. The show was a massive hit, with both critics and fans praising it for its dark and gritty tone, complex characters, and brutal, realistic fight choreography. It explored mature themes like faith, morality, and the consequences of violence, setting it apart from other Marvel TV shows. One of the things that made the Netflix series so compelling was its grounded approach to storytelling. Daredevil wasn't saving the world from alien invasions or battling interdimensional threats. He was fighting to protect his neighborhood, Hell's Kitchen, from the criminals and corrupt officials who preyed on its residents. The show also featured some of the best fight choreography ever seen in a superhero series. The hallway fight scene in season 1 became an instant classic, and the show continued to raise the bar with its action sequences in subsequent seasons. While Marvel has been tight-lipped about specific plot details, we do have some clues. The official synopsis tells us that Matt Murdock is still fighting for justice as a lawyer, while Wilson Fisk is pursuing his political ambitions in New York. Their paths will collide, leading to an inevitable showdown. Showrunner Dario Scardapane has described the show as a legal procedural with an action-based crime story vibe. He's also hinted that the show will be even more violent than the Netflix series. In an interview, Scardapane and executive producer Sana Amanat said they were shocked by how neither Disney nor Marvel asked them to pull back on the show's violence. We know from other MCU series Echo that Fisk will be running for mayor of New York. If he wins, it could spell trouble for Daredevil and the city. In the comics, Fisk's time as mayor allows him to manipulate the city's resources and law enforcement to target Daredevil. We also know that Matt will be facing some personal challenges. He'll be dealing with the aftermath of his disappearance during the blip and trying to rebuild his life. He'll also be navigating a new relationship with Heather Glenn, a therapist who has different views on vigilantism. Adding another layer of intrigue, Yusuf Khan, Kamala Khan's father from Miss Marvel, will be seeking help from Matt Murdock. This crossover with another MCU character suggests that Daredevil Born Again will be more connected to the larger MCU than the Netflix series was. Marvel has released a few trailers and teasers that give us glimpses of what to expect. We see Matt and Fisk meeting in a diner, hinting at a tense confrontation. Fisk says to Matt, "By the look of it, you've come up in the world," to which Matt replies, "I could say the same about you." This exchange highlights the changes both characters have gone through since we last saw them. They're also also scenes of Daredevil in action, showcasing the show's gritty, brutal fight choreography. One trailer shows Fisk saying, "Vigilantes are not heroes, they are a threat to society." This suggests that Fisk will be using his political power to try and take down Daredevil. As I mentioned earlier, Daredevil Born Again is a direct continuation of the Netflix series. This means that the events of those 3 seasons are canon within the MCU. We can expect the new show to build on the character development and storylines established in the previous series. Some fans have speculated that the Born Again title might hint at a storyline inspired by the classic Daredevil comic book arc of the same name. In that story, Karen Page, struggling with addiction, sells Daredevil's secret identity to Kingpin in exchange for drugs. Kingpin then uses this information to systematically destroy Matt Murdock's life, ruining his career, his finances, and his relationships. Driven to the brink, Daredevil suffers a mental breakdown and becomes increasingly violent. He eventually recovers with the help of his estranged mother and confronts Kingpin in a final showdown. It'll be interesting to see if the new series draws any inspiration from this iconic comic book storyline. The return of Ailey Zurer as Vanessa Fisk and Joanne Whalley as Maggie Murdock suggests that the show might indeed be adapting elements of Born Again. Daredevil has already made a few appearances in the MCU, though, showing up in Spider-Man No Way Home, She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, and Echo. Daredevil Born Again will further solidify his place in the larger MCU. There's a lot of speculation about how Daredevil might interact with other MCU characters in the future. Could we see him team up with Spider-Man or even join the Avengers? And only time will tell. Daredevil Born Again was filmed on location in New York City, primarily in Harlem, which is standing in for Hell's Kitchen, and Williamsburg. This adds to the show's authenticity and allows it to capture the gritty atmosphere of Daredevil's world and New York City in general. Interestingly, the show is being produced on a smaller budget than other Marvel Studios productions. This decision was made to allow for multiple seasons and to maintain the show's grounded and street-level focus. Daredevil Born Again has the potential to be more than just another superhero show. It could have a significant impact on the larger MCU. The show's darker tone and focus on street-level crime could offer a welcome contrast to the more cosmic and fantastical elements that have been prevalent in recent MCU projects. It could also pave the way for more grounded, character-driven stories within the MCU. Personally, I can't wait to see how this new series expands on the Daredevil mythos. The Netflix series was praised for its dark tone and complex characters and brutal action sequences, and I'm hoping that Daredevil Born Again will continue that trend while also exploring new facets of Daredevil's world. I'm also excited to see how the show handles the return of Kingpin. Vincent D'Onofrio's portrayal of the character was one of the highlights of the Netflix series, and I'm eager to see what he does with the role now that Fisk is a powerful political figure. In the comics, Daredevil is known for his radar sense, which allows him to perceive his surroundings in a unique way. He can even read printed text by feeling the ink on the page. It'll be interesting to see if the show explores these lesser-known aspects of his powers. The show also has the potential to delve into some mature and thought-provoking themes. Daredevil's struggle with his Catholic faith and his violent actions as a vigilante could be a source of compelling drama. The show could also explore the psychological effects of trauma and the complexities of morality in a world where the lines between good and evil are often blurred. So, are you ready for the return of Daredevil? Dive back into Hell's Kitchen with us and get ready for a wild ride. And if you're curious about what other heroes whose powers came from unexpected origins, don't forget to click this video right here to see our previous video, Superheroes Who Got Their Powers by Accident. You won't want to miss it. Bye!
Daredevil faced a deranged artist and almost lost a sidekick. It's an awesome little story with a pretty interesting villain, and I think you're gonna love it. So, I'm Adam Andrews, this is Top 10 Nerd, and let's talk about the artist who broke Daredevil. Our story picks up in Daredevil Volume 5, Issue number 10. At this time in Daredevil's career, he has taken on a young vigilante protege named Blindspot, aka Samuel Chung. In his community, there is a shrine where people who need Blindspot's help can leave notes, but one night, a different kind of note was left. An invitation. This invitation led Blindspot to the address of a warehouse in Washington Heights where the mysterious invitee had planted a huge mural of some kind of battlefield alongside a body of one of his victims and buckets filled with the same stuff that he used to paint the mural. Blood. When Blindspot called Daredevil to the scene, he was able to use his superior sense of smell to figure out that this painting was using the red from around 113 different people. Now the next issue picks up with a recently created, visibly obvious Inhuman fleeing from some thugs who are targeting him specifically for being an Inhuman. Even though his power is to simply create luminescent snowflakes that can't even do any damage, the thugs are going through with their plan anyways, until the Inhuman is saved and the thugs are introduced to the afterlife by a mysterious person. The Inhuman is thankful until his savior turns on him as well. Now back at at the sight of the mural, Daredevil alerted the police, the area became a crime scene, and now that the investigation is over, the owner of the warehouse is trying to capitalize on this mural by opening it up for the public and charging a $10 viewing fee. It's very New York. Obviously, this is met with quite a bit of opposition by the city and the police, who try to interfere, hiring Daredevil's alter ego, Matt Murdock, from the DA's office to stop this from happening. It's kind of funny how that works out. Like, he just always happens to be in on the same thing that he happens to be working on as a superhero. I think it's kind of weird, I'm just saying. But unfortunately, some weeks later, when the owner was beginning to open the building up and collecting his admission fees, it turns out that whoever the artist of the mural was had returned and defaced the mural, replacing most of it with the quote, "You're only as good as your last performance," which was followed by a new address that directed the police and the heroes watching over it to a vacant building. On one of the floors of said building, the artist had struck again, planting the bodies of 6 Inhumans, including the one from the beginning of the issue, posing them doing regular daily tasks and even sitting on the toilet. Pretty bad. With this new work being connected to the previous one, Matt Murdock as his DA self was one of the first people on the scene. But while he was here working with the police, alongside Samuel Chung, who Matt had hired as his assistant, Matt sensed an extra presence in the distance and knew instantly that it was the perpetrator staying to watch as people uncovered his new work for the first time. And he knew that because this guy was an artist, and that's what artists do apparently. Also arsonists. Matt made up an excuse and left the scene to change to his Daredevil costume and confront the villain, who was waiting on the roof of the building. As the villain uses his powers to draw in scents and sounds and any other sensory information around him, he also displays how utterly insane he is as he asks Daredevil for his thoughts on his quote art, while also introducing himself as Muse. Throwing one of his billy clubs, Daredevil begins to attack Muse, but not only does Muse catch the club and snap it in half, just showing how strong he is, but he drives Daredevil off using an explosive that was actually just a dummy grenade, and he escaped into the night. Now, back inside the crime scene, the new Atalan Security Service, aka the Inhuman Police, have showed up on the scene, as this is a crime against Inhumans. Being led by Frank McGee, a former police officer and the current head of the NASS, the Inhumans continue their investigation using their advanced technology. Now, while Matt tries his best to request that they share whatever findings they come up with, it's fruitless, as in order to get the go-ahead for that kind of thing, he would need to go talk to the head honcho of the Inhuman people. And that's exactly what Matt, as Daredevil, goes to do, getting an audience with the queen of the Inhumans, Medusa. Now, unfortunately, she pretty much instantly refuses Daredevil's request, but of course, we gotta get a fight scene in here, so because Daredevil does not accept that answer without first giving her more information, he refuses to leave, leading to a fight between himself and the Inhuman known as Karnak. Now, Karnak is pretty cool, and he possesses the ability to see the flaws in everything, and I do mean everything, in fighting styles, in plans, in devices, in people. There was even a time where Karnak found a flaw in death itself and brought himself back to life. It's super ridiculous, super stupid, maybe lazy writing, but kinda cool. Anyways, these two have a hand-to-hand fight, and somehow Matt is still able to come out on top. But it was all for nothing, as Medusa still says no. Normally we would expect a little more help from the Inhumans, as they are kind of heroes, but as queen of the Inhumans, and this being a crime with mainly Inhuman victims, Medusa needs to show her people that she can protect them by handling it herself. So instead, Frank McGee agrees to go behind her back and work with Daredevil anyways. Now, this whole little Inhuman rendezvous is interrupted by Daredevil receiving a call from Blindspot, his ward, if you want to call him that. Now, it turns out that in the meantime, while all that was going on, Muse had attacked a courtroom that Blindspot, as Samuel Chung, his alter ego, happened to be helping at, and the villain was taking away Judge Laird, who had been presented by Councilwoman Andrea Pearson with the case to shut down public access to the location of this original crime, the blood mural that Muse made. Now, being followed by Blindspot, Muse took the judge to the sewers, where he had also apparently gathered and tied up Pearson and 2 police officers who were on the scene of the first crime. As a kind of weird punishment for trying to shut down access to his original work of art, Muse planned to use all of them for a new work representing the justice system. Luckily, Blind Spot showed up and lured Muse away, because Muse was like, oh, a hero, he has to be part of this new justice system artwork thing. Muse chased Blind Spot deeper into the sewers, but the vigilante used his suit's camouflage ability to turn invisible and trick Muse. Blind Spot then returned to the victims while invisible to free them and escort them to safety as Muse closed in on their location. To give the other victims extra time, Blind Spot sort of sacrificed himself and tried to lead Muse away again, but unfortunately his technological suit ran out of power source, meaning batteries, leaving him unable to go invisible, and as a consequence, Muse captured him as he was just about to escape the sewers, leaving his phone on the street, having just tried to call Daredevil for help. Now, going to the scene of Blind Spot's capture where his phone was left, Daredevil and Frank McGee tried to figure out a game plan. But as that happened, Daredevil began to just tune everyone out. Tuned out Frank, tuned out the city, tuned out everything, sitting on the ground and meditating on his senses. Now, since Muse's body acts like a vortex which can pull in every bit of sensory information around him, he is essentially an empty void of nothingness. And that is what Daredevil focuses his senses on, scanning the city for specifically areas of nothingness, for a blind spot in his senses. And he finds it. Now, meanwhile, while that was happening, Muse took Blind Spot to his garret, or his artist's warehouse thing, I guess, showing it off and its body part decor to Blind Spot to try and scare him, do a little intimidation tactic. Now, after doing a little monologuing, as all villains do, Muse was deciding what to do with his newest capture when Daredevil arrived, coming crashing in through a window and throwing his billy club yet again, which the villain caught yet again. Big surprise. Now, with Blind Spot as his hostage, Muse got suddenly inspired, and using his fingers, he very quickly removed Blind Spot's ability to see, shall we say. You can probably figure out what happened there, or you can just look at the picture, because I'm sure there's a picture beside this. And then he just ran off, tossing Blind Spot at Daredevil. Now, luckily, this kid is a trooper, and he's okay. So, on his way out, being pursued by Daredevil, Muse and the hero got into a little scuffle in the dark that ended up crashing into a room where all of the missing people used in his mural were hanging from the ceiling, being drained, but thankfully, they're all still alive. Muse cut the ropes hanging them to distract Daredevil, who then caught them and then continued his pursuit. Making it onto the rooftop, however, the chase was immediately over as the entire roof was surrounded by the inhuman authorities led by Frank McGee. With Muse cuffed, Daredevil, caught up and fueled by rage for Blind Spot's injury, was about to seemingly put a beat down on the villain, but having noticed Daredevil's intentions and being completely and utterly insane, Muse broke his own fingers like this. He just started doing this, stating that that's what Daredevil would have wanted, for him to be unable to create more works of art. It was then that Daredevil took off Muse's freaky as hell mask, only to find out that the villain looked just as, if not more, terrifying underneath that mask. No explanation on why he looks like that. No one ever says a thing about it. He just looks like that. Muse was then taken away and imprisoned at the high security detention level of New Adelan. Now, as for Blind Spot, who was now missing his eyes, unfortunately, because of him, the duo were able to save the lives of more than 100 people who were used for the mural. Daredevil would have to go on as a hero, living with the guilt of what happened to Blind Spot, but funnily enough, Blind Spot would go on to later have his eyesight restored by the Hand, and after that...
My video on Batman Nightfall is taking a while because, you know, it's a massive story. So while I work on that, we figured we'd split up and release an older video that we never ended up putting out. With his recent appearance in Stride of Pride on the She-Hulk show, as well as his upcoming series on Disney+, now is a great time to look at one of the Man Without Fear's most iconic stories. I'm Andrew Boyd, and today on Top 10 Nerd, I will be attempting to explain the plot of Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli's Daredevil Born Again. But first, a little background. Take it away, past Andrew. When Frank Miller started working at Marvel in the late 70s, Daredevil was not a popular book, and Miller was working mostly as a cover artist and a fill-in artist. When he was working on an issue of the Spectacular Spider-Man that guest-starred Daredevil, Miller saw the potential in the character and campaigned to be moved to the Man Without Fear's book. He became the regular artist on Daredevil number 158, working with writer Roger McKenzie. Miller disliked McKenzie's scripts so much that that he almost quit the series, but when new Marvel editor Denny O'Neil arrived, he was impressed by a backup story Miller had written and made Miller the penciler and the writer on the book. Miller's stories proved so popular that after only 3 issues, Daredevil was taken from a bi-monthly title to a monthly title. He stayed on the title until issue 191, having essentially reinvented and reinvigorated the character. Miller was shot to fame, you know, for a comic book creator, and went on to create classic works such as The Dark Knight Returns. Miller was asked back to the Daredevil title in 1986 as a writer. He agreed on the condition that the artist, David Mazzucchelli, would be working from his complete scripts rather than using the infamous Marvel method, which focused more on artists using a vague outline to draw a story and the writer filling in the dialogue after. Miller and Mazzucchelli would go on to create Batman Year One together the very next year, but not before crafting one of Daredevil's most beloved stories. Let's dive in. A few important story threads are actually set up in the issue immediately before the Born Again arc in Daredevil number 226, so we'll very briefly go over just the important stuff from there. Matt Murdock's mental health is beginning to take a turn for the worse, with him isolating and constantly ruminating about how unfair his life is. His firm, Nelson and Murdock, is closing, and his relationship with his girlfriend, Glory O'Brien, is on the rocks. Glory has been confiding in Matt's partner, Foggy, about her concerns, and both are surprised to realize that they have a lot of chemistry. Glory starts crying because this was a book written by a man in the 80s, and apologizes for, quote, going on like a little girl. Foggy reassures her, saying that it's okay as he, quote, likes little girls. Well, no, that can't be right. I like little girls. Well, I'm sure he just means that. You know what, let's move on to the main story. Born Again begins in Mexico with Karen Page. Karen is Matt Murdock's ex-girlfriend who moved to California to become an actress. She developed a serious substance abuse issue and became an actress in adult films to support her addiction. She has become a junkie in serious need of a fix, and in order to get it, she offers her pusher an envelope containing Daredevil's true identity in exchange for the smack. The envelope gets passed up the criminal food chain until it ends up in the hands of Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin. Excited by the prospect of ruining his nemesis's life, Fisk tells his assistant Wesley to prepare to have anyone who has come into contact with the envelope killed once he verifies the information within. In New York, Matt gets possibly the worst mail dump in history as he gets a letter from the bank saying that his last 2 mortgage payments have not been received, a letter from the IRS saying that his accounts are frozen as he is being audited, and a cassette tape with a message from Glory informing him that she is breaking up with him. Just when it seems things can't get much worse, there's a knock at the door, and Matt is served with a subpoena telling him to appear before a grand jury as a respected police officer is claiming he saw Matt bribe a witness. Across town, Glory's apartment has been broken into. She can't call Matt as she just dumped him, so she calls Foggy for support. Afraid to stay in her apartment, Glory asks Foggy if she can stay with him for a bit. They chat by the fire at Foggy's place as things continue to get toasty between the two of them. Daredevil goes after the cop who accused him of bribery, Nick Manolis. He breaks into his apartment and confronts Nick, but doesn't get any information. He leaves, but continues to spy on Nick, overhearing him make a phone call to persons unknown, confirming that Daredevil showed up. He says he will continue to lie about Murdock in exchange for help with his 6 sons' medical expenses. Daredevil has his confirmation that someone is trying to frame him, but by going after Nick, he has inadvertently confirmed Kingpin's suspicions about the Man Without Fear's secret identity. Back at Foggy's, Foggy wakes up on his couch to the sight and smells of Glory making breakfast. The phone rings and Glory picks up. It is Matt, who is understandably confused as to why his ex is answering his best friend's phone. He talks to Foggy about all of his recent troubles, minus the Daredevil-related activities, as Foggy is not aware of his friend's alter ego at this point in continuity. Foggy and Matt begin working together on a defense case for his upcoming indictment. Meanwhile, Kingpin's network of spies relays all the information about Matt's life falling apart, as Fisk squirms in delight at his enemy's predicament. His suspicions confirmed, he gives the order to have anyone who came into contact with the envelope killed, so that he can be the only one privy to Daredevil's secret. Despite a fantastic defense by Foggy, Fisk's frame job works and Matt is disbarred and can no longer practice law. Impressed with Foggy, Kingpin makes a note to hire him as one of his own attorneys. Back in Mexico, Karen returns to the pusher for another fix and witnesses him being killed by a hired assassin. The killer goes after Karen, who runs off into the night. night. At the same time, Matt is walking home to his apartment as his thoughts become more and more paranoid, suspecting that anyone, including Foggy, might be involved in the frame. Just as he is about to get home, his apartment blows up. Matt sifts through the ruins of his home, but all he finds is his Daredevil suit. This makes him realize that this is a message from his enemy, and as the issue ends, he remarks that the frame job was a nice piece of work, but Kingpin shouldn't have signed it. Part 2, issue 228. Purgatory. Foggy and Glory are busy playing house when Matt calls, sounding paranoid and borderline delusional. Glory starts crying again, and Foggy gets on the line, but Matt has hung up. Matt is curled up in the fetal position in a seedy, cheap motel as his mind continues to spiral. The IRS has frozen his bank accounts and his credit cards, leaving Matt with only $10 to survive on. He thinks about how far Kingpin has caused him to fall and contemplates killing his enemy. As the Kingpin looks over the city from his penthouse, delighting in his enemy's torture, Matt dreams of beating Fisk and forcing him to fix his broken life. Matt wakes up and continues calling Foggy and Glory, accusing them of being complicit in his downfall and telling Foggy, "I'm on to you, Nelson." Matt hears footsteps in the hall. It's simply the hotel manager coming to inform Matt that it's time to check out, but in his paranoid state, Matt thinks he's one of Kingpin's men and attacks him before leaving to go and confront Fisk. Fisk is in the gym, you know, pumping iron in his little purple Speedo, as the PI hired to follow Matt describes an incident on the subway where 3 armed youths entered the subway car and robbed the passengers. Matt seemed indifferent to the situation until the robbers came to him, and he brutally attacked the robbers, breaking several of their bones in the process. A cop comes on board and Matt attacks him too, stealing the officer's billy club. Kingpin is overjoyed, telling the PI that he is lucky to have witnessed the death of a noble man. Matt is at a payphone talking to Foggy about his deteriorating mental state and how he is planning on going after Fisk, but we soon realize that he is actually talking to himself in a state of delusion. Back in Mexico, Karen tries to call Matt but learns that his line has been disconnected. She realizes that the men chasing her must be trying to kill her to tie up loose ends, and decides she must get back to New York to ask Matt for help. At the Daily Bugle, Daredevil's friend and reporter Ben Urich is trying to convince J. Jonah Jameson to let him look into Matt's case. Ben knows Matt's secret and knows that he would never engage in bribery and suspects that the Kingpin must be involved. Matt goes to Fisk Tower and is let in by the secretary who tells him he is expected. He is led to Kingpin's gym where the two fight. Kingpin trounces Matt and has him put in the back of a stolen taxicab. He has the driver of the cab killed with the billy club and has the doors rusted shut before having the cab pushed into the East River. Fisk spends the next few days in ecstasy, but his mood sours when the police find the cab and the driver, but no sign of Matt. Part 3, issue 229, Pariah. It's Christmas time, and Matt is celebrating the holiday by curling up in an alley in the fetal position, thinking about the accident that robbed him of his sight but gave him his heightened senses. He remembers a woman with a gold crucifix around her neck who comforted him in the hospital and told him to think of his new senses as a blessing. He wonders who could have cared about him and comforted him so much and then disappeared from his life, never to be heard from again. In Midtown, Foggy and Glory are doing their Christmas shopping when a purse snatcher does his thing. Glory tries to fight him off, but when the thief pulls a knife, Foggy uses a bowling ball he had bought for a friend to hit him over the head. Glory laments how horrible a city New York is, where such a thing could happen, and none of the other passerby would help or even care. Oh, Frank Miller, you're just full of the holiday spirit, aren't you? Ben Urich goes to the hospital to try and talk to Officer Nick Manolis about Matt's situation. Nick's son is having cardiac troubles and is about to undergo surgery. Ben pieces together that Nick must have lied about Matt in order to get his son the medical attention he needs. In Mexico, Karen is spending her Christmas trying to rob a blind beggar. You know, I think there's actually a Bing Crosby song about that. When the beggar catches her and starts screaming, Karen knocks him out, takes his money, and moves on. But the hired killers aren't far behind. Matt wanders the streets until he comes across Turk Barrett and one of his associates who have been knocking out charity Santa Clauses and stealing their costumes so they can go to rich areas and collect donations for themselves. Matt tries to stop them, but he is weak with pneumonia, and Turk stabs him in the gut without much trouble and takes off. Back at the hospital, Nick's son has died on the operating table. As helping his child was the only reason Nick agreed to work for the Kingpin, he begins to tell Ben about the frame job. The two go to the parking garage to have a smoke and keep talking. Karen has dinner with another pusher named Paulo, who offers to keep her addiction fed and take her to America in exchange for her company. The hitmen show up, but Paulo's packing a shoddy and takes them out before fleeing with Karen. telling her that she better be worth it. It seems like the only people having a remotely decent Christmas are Foggy and Glory, who despite their run-in with the purse snatcher are enjoying each other's company. Foggy gives her a very expensive necklace, and the two start smooching up a storm. In the hospital parking garage, Nick and Ben are talking when one of the nurses comes out and attacks them. She tells Ben that from now on, anytime he says the name Matt Murdock, he will lose the use of his fingers. She drives the point home by breaking all 5 of his right-hand fingers and brutally beating Nick, putting him in traction. Matt breaks into Fogwell's boxing gym and starts taking his frustrations out on a bag. Due to sickness and blood loss, he passes out, but a nun comes in and finds him and says his name. She is the same woman who comforted him as a child. Kingpin is in the gym training and obsessing over the fact that Matt got away and is out there somewhere and might one day come for him. The words "no corpse" rattle around in his head as he pushes himself to his physical limits to try and take his mind off Murdock. He always thought of Daredevil as more of a nuisance than an actual threat, but he realizes that Matt is more dangerous to him than he ever realized, and that by taking so much away from Matt, he has accidentally taught him that a man without hope is a man without fear. Part 4, Issue 230, Born Again. Matt is being taken care of by the nun, Sister Maggie, in the mission. His heart stops and he dies for a moment, but due to Maggie's efforts, comes back to life. We see him lying in bed, this time in a Christ-like position, symbolizing both the literal and metaphorical death and resurrection he has gone through in the last 3 issues. Karen is in America with Paulo, making her way to New York, where she is sure that Matt will save her. She makes it to New York, but Paulo decides that he will not let her leave him. Fisk continues to train, sparring 6 black belts at once and obsessing about the fact that Matt Murdock is alive. He beats the 6 black belts and in his paranoia tells Wesley to locate a man named Nuke. Wesley objects, saying that no one has ever used Nuke for a domestic job, but Fisk makes it clear that this is not up for debate. Meanwhile, Foggy has just taken a high-paying job as a lawyer. He doesn't know that he's working for Fisk, but something does seem slightly off to him. Him and Glory talk and worry about Matt as neither of them have seen him for almost 2 weeks. Ben has been sufficiently scared by his encounter in the parking garage and decides to drop the story. Jameson and Ben have a meeting, and JJ tells Ben he knows that something has happened and tries to convince him to get back on the journalistic horse. You know, it's funny, when JJ shows up in a Spider-Man story, he comes off as a buffoonish jerk, but when he's in Daredevil stories, he often comes across more like a character from Spotlight. When Ben refuses to even make eye contact with Jonah, JJ kicks Ben out of his office in disgust. Once outside the office, a super shady janitor reveals to Ben that Kingpin is having him watched and that he better keep his mouth shut. Things get even worse when Nick phones Ben from his hospital bed and tells him he wants to go on the record about Kingpin. Ben pretends not to know what he's talking about, but the nurse comes into Nick's room and makes Ben listen as she strangles Nick to death. Matt continues to try and recover with the help of Maggie, and he realizes that she's the same woman who helped him as a child. Maggie prays for Matt's survival, telling God that Matt should not be punished for her sins, and that if he lives, she knows he will bring light to this poisoned city. Karen manages to get away from Paulo for a bit, and gets a hold of Foggy and convinces him to meet her for lunch. She doesn't reveal Matt's secret, but she tells Foggy what has happened to her, and that only Matt can help her. Foggy fills her in on what has happened with Matt, and convinces her to stay with him rather than letting her go back to Paulo. Ben has spent the last few days in fear, but as he thinks about everything that he's witnessed, his resolve strengthens, and he finally allows himself to speak the words, Matt Murdock. Kingpin has to wait 3 days before he can hire Nuke, and decides to use that time to draw Matt out of hiding, and makes a call to find a suitable lunatic, and has his men threaten Melvin Potter into making a duplicate of Daredevil's costume for the lunatic to wear. Matt's fever break and he is on the mend. He asks Sister Maggie if she is his mother and she says no, but Matt hears her heartbeat and realizes she's lying.